A very good evening and a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Pick n Pay and brought to you from the Roux Hotel in Scotland, where, as I look out over my broad and sculpted left shoulder, I can see the ocean. I can see the famous St Andrews Beach, where Chariots of Fire was filmed, and where this week, when it's not raining, I shall be running at an admittedly slightly more modest pace than that scene in the film. And just down below me, the first fairway, the 18th fairway and green, the R&A Clubhouse, and the Old Course at St Andrews, as iconic a location as there is in golf, at a tournament that is not far behind, the Alfred Dunhill Links Championships, which celebrates its 20th year as a tournament, 36 years of Alfred Dunhill golf here at St Andrews, and a week that we did not have last year for reasons you won't need me to tell you about. But with conditions in place and management and social distancing, the event is back in 2021. And so, having landed from Dublin this morning, I'm in Scotland. I'm in the brand new and enormously impressive restaurant and bar on the top floor of the Roux, which has had a fabulous refurbishment. And I'm celebrating both tonight and on Thursday with some of the wine of the Alfred Dunhill Championship. Now, the tournament was founded and is presided over by Johan Rupert, who is a great friend to South Africa on so many levels, but one that people sometimes forget on the back of all of his golf and business interests is that he has been an enormously dynamic force for good in the wine world. And the Rupert wine range, which is broad, features, unsurprisingly, at this year's tournament. It features, though, with a series of other South African wines. And so tonight and on Thursday, I'll be chatting about some of those wines, paying tribute to them, and also having a look at them in the context of this tournament. And we kick off tonight with three estates we've seen on the show before on a number of occasions, three estates I'm particularly fond of, and whose wine has gone beyond the borders of South Africa with great success, and which finds itself a very welcome home here in St Andrews this week. So the wine estates we will be chatting about are Ernie Els, Waterford, and then appropriately Rupert and Rothschild, part of the Rupert wine empire. And so let's meet three very special guests. Carla Malherbe is, I think the official title is Traveling the World and Getting People to Realize How Good the Wine Is. I think that's on the business card. Louis Strydom, who's been on the show many times before, who is not only the winemaker and managing director at Ernie Els, he's also in charge of Ernie's Short Game. And then Mark Roux, who is a multiple award-winning winemaker. And basically, he does all the work, and Kevin Arnold takes all the credit for Waterford, which is something I think Kevin is rather happy with. Guys, welcome. Lovely to see you all. Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine.
Thanks, Dan.
Good to be here.
Good to be here. Thank you.
I am here. I know, Mark, in particular, you would love to be here because this is an event you know particularly well. Give us some of your thoughts and memories and recollections of the time you have spent at the Alfred Dunhill Links Championship.
Yes, thanks, Dan. Yes, I really miss it. You know, I think I've been fortunate enough to be there about 4 or 5 times. It's so memorable to me. I'm not a massive golfer. I do enjoy swinging a club every now and then, but I mean, going to the home of golf, I think even if you're not a golfer, it's always something special. I think it's something similar to South African rugby fans who walk into Ellis Park. So that's something really special. I do miss it, and it's unfortunate that I'm not there sitting next to you this evening.
Well, I shall just have to drink the wine myself and bravely get through it. Well, what's it like for you, Mark, as a winemaker? As I say, you've won a number of awards, you've got great recognition for your wine, but then you're at an event like this and you look up because you'd normally be here on the Thursday night in particular, pouring the wine, and you suddenly look up and there's Bill Murray asking for a glass of Waterford, or Andy Garcia asking for it, or Tico Torres from Bon Jovi, people who are modern icons in their respective fields, just casually asking you for a glass of Waterford.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear that Waterford's name is being passed around and that people do come up and request certain wines. But I mean, it's so fascinating actually standing behind a table and seeing these, I suppose, icons that you normally see on the table and ask you and question you and ask you about your career, and they're so invested. I think one memory that I have quite close to me that I remember is actually I was standing at the table. I think it was my very first Dunhill, and I was busy pouring the gem. And most of the guests almost swing past and they just ask for a glass and they move on. And then basically one gentleman arrived at my table. He almost came around to the back end and wanted to help me start pouring. And we started chatting about my wine. And he was so interested in me. And then he actually introduced himself. And I thought it was so unnecessary because I knew exactly who he was. It was actually Sean Fitzpatrick. And it was just such a humbling experience having this guy, such an athlete, a professional in his field and so accomplished, trying to find out so much information about me. And I feel I'm just this young winemaker from South Africa presenting. So it was a great experience to sit and chat to some of the greats. And yeah, amazing people, so humble and so nice to meet them in person. I think sometimes, especially some of the more the film stars, you got a very clear picture from what they do as a career. But when you see them in real life, they're just really humble, down to earth people, down to play a great game of golf and have fun for the week.
And there will be more of them here this week supporting the Alfred Dunhill Links Championship in its 20th year. Amongst those, I mentioned Andy Garcia a little earlier. He is back this year. Also joining us this year, big Vladimir Klitschko, the boxing legend. Tico Torres from Bon Jovi's back. I think Tom Chaplin from Keane, Ruud Gullit, Jamie Redknapp. It's a great selection. Caught up with Shane Warne a little earlier. He's staying in the hotel here as well. It's a great selection of people who are drinking South African wine and drinking South African wine from a whole range. What about that element of it, Mark? The fact that lining up is what is really a rock star collection of South African wine, and wine that's given such a great opportunity. Because Johan could quite easily say, well, this is my event, we're going to have my wine, but instead he opens the doors to so many other wines and makes this a real celebration across the board of South African wine.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic that Rupert welcomes other South African wine farms, because I think us as producers sitting here, we're not necessarily just trying to shout for ourselves because we're such a small speck in our industry, but really I think get the brand South Africa out there. I think we also realize in South Africa we're so unique and everyone's got a very specific site on their property, but I think the biggest, I suppose, selling point and excitement about South Africa is that there is diversity and everyone's shining their own trophy on where they create their wine. So it's equally special. So it's fantastic that he's invited. I think a lot of them are actually his personal friends, that the farms are actually there representing on the evening so that the people can experience South African wine, but also the diversity within the South African wines.
You talk about a lot of friends of Johan's. Louis, that's a big part of why Ernie's wine is here. Ernie's played the tournament on many times. I have some great memories of spending time here with him. He's not here this year, unfortunately, but his wine certainly is. And that speaks as much as anything to his very close friendship with Johan Rupert.
Yeah, and I think Johan has been to the Ernie Els farm many times. And you said that Ernie's friendship with Johan and Johan's commitment towards golf. It's I think that people don't realize how much he's invested in golf, and I think that is the link between Ernie and Johan over the many years. And Johan sits on Ernie's Tee to Green board, and I know always like in the end of the day I worked for Johan himself, because Johan's put his fingers in all the pies. And but it's nice for us as Ernie Els Wines to be very involved and support the Rupert family on the at the Dunhill.
And how much would it mean to Ernie for everything that he's done? I know how passionate he is about the wine and what a keen interest he takes in it. And we'll talk about his wine story just a little later. But what would it mean to Ernie just knowing that, once again, it's his wine sitting here with the very best of South African wine, especially South African red wine. And here is the signature headlining a selection of Ernie's finest alongside so much other great South African wine.
Yes, I think Ernie's got such a deep passion for what we do on the farm and the great wines that we make, and he wants to show the rest of the world the wines that we make. And it's not only about Ernie Els putting a name onto a bottle of red wine, but it's the wine just in the bottle. That's actually that he would love to showcase for him. So for him, it's really great to have the Ernie Els wine, the signature specifically. We're going to talk about a little bit later at the event to showcase what brand South Africa can do to on a very much international market.
It is a wine you are pushing out here that sits, I think, alongside just about anything in the international market because it's been acclaimed, it's been awarded. It's just really, really good wine. Tell us a little bit about the story of that wine, Ernie Els, and he's falling into the world of wine. I think Johan nudged him in the direction of discovering wine, but it was you sitting down with him and really testing his palate that got you to discover what he liked and gave us the signature we now drink so happily today.
Yeah, I think it's a great story. So when I discussed the wine with Ernie, I said, it's really, you need to make the decision on the wine. You need to take ownership. You need to make sure if you stand behind the wine that reason why you chose this wine specifically. So Ernie said, I don't know much about wine. We up at Kempton Park, we know a lot about brandy and Coke, but wine we don't know anything about. So, but I said to Ernie, that's the great thing about wine. You don't have to know anything about wine to know what you like. All that you have to know is what you like in the glass right in front of you. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put 5 wines in front of you, number them 1 to 5. You won't know what's in the blend. You won't know what it is, and all you actually tell me is the number of the wine you like. And that's the essence of wine in it. That what wine is all about is what you like and enjoy in a glass of wine. We can, as winemakers, we can tell you all the nice little secrets and all the nice technical information, but if you don't enjoy the wine, there's really nothing to it. And so that day, Ernie chose wine number 5, and that was the Bordeaux blend that he chose. It is Medoc based. What I mean by that is it's 60% of Cabernet Sauvignon in, and that's how the wine was born back. Can you believe it? Back in 2000, which was our maiden vintage. So we've done 21 vintages of the Ernie Els wines, and I've been the winemaker of all 21 vintages. So that's been great for me to see how the blend and the signature has developed over the last 21 years, and people have to ask you which is the favorite vintage that you've ever made, and I think that it keeps changing, but at the moment, in my mind, the 2009 is my favorite at the moment. But it's the development of the wine in the glass, and that's the thing about wine. Wine is never a constant; it's changing. It's a living product, and that's what makes wine really exciting. Dan?
I want to come back a little more to Ernie's wine story, but having had the 2 guests, so to speak, on the show, let's go back to someone who's on home turf this week. Carla, the Rupert and Rothschild Baron Edmund, is sitting beside me, and I'm about to have my first of, I suspect, a few sips of it so far. What sort of importance does this particular event hold for you guys as a broader Rupert wine brand, showcasing the whole range over the week of such extraordinary wine towards a pretty impressive group of people who come each year?
Thanks, Dan. I think it's hugely important for us. Mark touched on it earlier, and you spoke to, you asked Mark the question about sharing the stage with just the Rupert Farms, as opposed to, Johan putting just his wines onto the stage. He's brought in a lot of his other friends, and for us, it's really about collaboration. We don't just want to have this event as Rupert and Rothschild. We believe in brand South Africa and really just showcasing the best of what South Africa has to offer. So our partners that are with us in this tournament and sharing the wines with the people that get to enjoy them. It's a really fundamental part of building the brand and making sure that we stand together as brand South Africa.
And I think that's a really good point to make, Carla, because we can count the brands we've got here this evening with Waterford and Ernie Els, along with yourselves, Rupert Rothschild. There's also Rustin Freda, Skalkberger, Lamotte. 6 or 7 brands that will be seen from a South African perspective this week. But for me, the impact is not just these are 7 great South African wines, it's the people from all over the world and influential people who can buy a lot of wine if they want to, saying, what, South African wine is really good. And so for me, you're not showcasing 7 brands or estates, you really are showcasing South Africa and making people realize just what good wine we make, if for some reason they didn't already know.
Yeah, that's absolutely. It's exactly it. We're not in this for ourselves and just for the brand Rupert and Rothschild. We are here to showcase great South African wines and really stand together collectively. We look at what's happened in the last 20 months across the world, and for us, if we stand as sort of isolated people and brands throughout the world, throughout the globe, we're never going to really have a strong brand as the South African industry. So. For us, it's Mr. Rupert has got good friends in the industry. He's brought them into this golf tournament, and for us, it's really just standing together with everybody and showing everybody what we can do and meeting great people and sharing stories. Louis also touched on it earlier. Wine is about stories. Dan, we spoke about it before the show started. It's every winemaker can stand up and say they make the best wine and this is how they make it and this is the technique they use and these are the barrels that they use. But the consumer's never going to remember that at the end of the day. They remember the stories. So if you can get in the face of the people that you want to interact with and give them a good story that they can remember, then your brand will live on with them. And that's what I think what we're all about as a brand, certainly.
I shall ask you for a story or two in just a moment, but you do raise another very important and very interesting question for South African wine at the moment, which is getting wine in front of people around the world. What has the last stretch been like for you, Carla? Are you seeing wine pick up for your brands around the world? Are we on a little bit of an upward trend? Is it a good news story at the moment?
For us, it's a really good news story. We have been quite fortunate and very, very lucky that our wine has sort of grown quite substantially in the last 20 months. So we know that there is a lot of demand coming out of most markets for the wine. And we have just really tried in the last 18, 20, 24 months to try and make sure that our brand equity is solid and strong and just make sure that, people, when it comes to pandemics and it comes to, people not feeling safe and secure, I think in general, they go back to brands that they try and they trust and that make them feel safe. So, for us as the bigger brands, I talk about Ernie Els and Waterford, Rust and Freda, all of them, we're very fortunate and I think very privileged to be able to say that we have tried and trusted brand names and that the consumer really feels safe in purchasing those at a time when, that becomes really important to them. So I think it's, about making sure that our brands stay top of mind for them, for the consumer, to make sure that, we stay relevant in the future. And that's what we've been up to. So we're very, very happy that we can still sell to most of the markets and there is still quite significant support for the brand.
Your sentiment is being echoed by Angelique Kuvalakis, who's watching at the moment. South African wines are top-notch and deserve to be celebrated and enjoyed around the world. Well, they're certainly being enjoyed in Scotland this afternoon. Actually, sunshine in Scotland, who would have thought? And then the great Reginald Peckler, who joins us from Cheetah Plains. Mark, once you mentioned the gem, my mind runs all over South Africa as a whole. Many languages, many great varieties make the gem a complex and yet elegant wine to celebrate our Heritage Month. Words aren't enough. Few people use words quite like Reggie. Lovely to have you watching the show, Reggie. Hope all is well up in the Sabi Sands at the moment. The gem is mentioned there. We're not tasting the gem today. We're tasting something a little different, dare I say even more unique. But let's go back to Mark and to our man at Waterford. The friendships we spoke about earlier. Jeremy Ord, the owner, along with Kevin Arnold at Waterford, is another good friend of this tournament and is a great regular here. And so we often see the Waterford wine coming through, and we're drinking something that's called the Library Collection. Mr. LaRue, tell us a little bit about that. What is the background to it? How does that fit into the Waterford story?
Yeah, something really special. Unfortunately, we're not tasting the gem. I really liked Reggie's little comment there. I think he can maybe help me with some of my tasting notes, I think. Great sentence in there. I'm also drinking something special. I've actually opened a library collection, or I'm tasting a library collection that was opened from this afternoon. The library collection, a little bit in what it is what it says. So it's a library of wines that we have reference to, that we can always go back to the bookshelf, so to speak, and check on the wine, reread the book, and see if it still tells the same story or how the stories maybe changed or evolved. So it is a little bit of a run on research and development that we do at Waterford. We continually doing things in the cellar, backstage, trialing certain different varietals or techniques, and I think really to try and sharpen our tools, so to speak, when we're creating the gem. I think the wine, such as the gem, is rather unique. So there are not many benchmarks or wines similar that have 8+ varietals blended into it for us really to compare to. So we're really running our own story, our own little book, so to speak, with a gem. So we're doing our own research as well a lot. And that's where we came with the library collection, because some of the experiments are pretty delicious. They're very unique, and I suppose we don't want to create 100 commercial wines at the end of the day. So it's become a collection of once-off wines that are very, very exciting. And we've started a society or a wine club just before COVID started. And the idea was really to expose these wines to the wine club, to people that are a little bit more involved in our story long-term. Because I think the library collection is just looking at the wine once off might be a little odd. But it's following the story, you know, it's starting from the beginning pages right until the end to find out what makes sense. So it's exciting. I've opened the Ata, which is a Sangiovese Cabernet Sauvignon blend, which is quite exciting. And the BB, which you have in front of you, is something very strong on the Helderberg, is Bordeaux varietals, Cabernet driven. So that tends to pop up quite often in our library collection. Tends to be blended in with a little bit of Cabernet Franc or Merlot or Petit Verdot as well, because those are varying combinations that we're playing with. So very, very exciting wines, and generally small scale. Anything from 250 bottles up until about 1,000 bottles is where we hit the mark, the limits.
We're going to taste the wine in just a moment, and sample. You can give us a little more detail as we do so. But tell me about the process here. Cynical question, perhaps, but I shall ask it nonetheless. Is this kind of thing driven by you, Mark, the winemaker? I've got the opportunity. I think this could be a fun barrel. I think this could be something interesting, and creating something from that creative perspective? Or is this Damien and the marketing team hammering you to create something that's a bit more bespoke and a bit different, to give them another peg on which to hang their sales pitches?
I think it starts with me. They're the creators, so they create the story of the wine that I present in front of them. So it sometimes gets a bit difficult. But I mean, a lot of the wines don't always make it to bottle. But I think sometimes it's not always a very planned experiment. So anyone in the production or anyone sort of at Waterford, in the Waterford team, if they almost have a little bit of an inkling of this is something interesting or special or something that could work, we generally push it and see where it goes. I don't want to be a dictator at Waterford, but I mean, we do need to have sound wines that end up in the bottle. So if it ends up being bottled and approved to become a library wine, I think that's a greater decision. But I mean, playing around with and experimenting and going places, I think is a lot more free-flowing to almost anyone, not necessarily just me as the winemaker. Those ideas need to come from everyone that's sort of grouped at Waterford.
If you've had some of Mark's own label wine, you know he's got a great creative streak in him as a winemaker, and I think this library collection is just another example of that. I'm itching to try it. I'm going to hold on for a moment and jump over back to Carla before I do so. And the Rupert and Rothschild collaboration, for people who see the names, both names are rather well known. Give us just a snapshot, if you will, Carla, on the history, how these two great names came together to form this wine platform.
So it's still quite a new, young-ish winery in the South African context. It was founded in 1997, joint partnership between the Rupert family and the Rothschild family. So both sides own 50%. And at the very beginning, it was a partnership formed between Dr. Anton Rupert and Baron Edmund de Rothschild. And they later relinquished the reins to their respective sons. So that was to Antoine Rupert and to Baron Benjamin de Rothschild, which you'll see on the front label of our wines now, a partnership between those two. Sadly, when Antoine passed away in 2001, he then left his share of the business to Johann and to his sister Hannelie Rupert Kuchlenberg. So they today both own 25% each. And then the Rothschild family is represented by Baron Benjamin, passed away in January, So his wife, Ariane de Rothschild, she now handles everything on behalf of Edmund de Rothschild Heritage. So really a joint venture 50-50, and a really privilege to be able to represent a brand like this with these two wonderful names and families.
We do see the Rothschild name involved in wine well beyond France. There are lots of different parts of the winemaking world where the Rothschilds have an interest and influence. What sort of direct impact do their winemaking heritage have on what we're seeing here? It's wine that's made in South Africa, but are there winemakers coming over? Is there a degree of prescription from France as to how this wine comes out? How much on the ground impact is there from the Rothschild side of things?
It's actually very minimal. We have a board meeting once a year where everyone gets together. The winemaking team is very separate. Obviously our sort of approach has been a Bordeaux model. So we only produce 2 Bordeaux wines and 1 white wine, a Chardonnay. So that approach is obviously fundamentally French, but with the South African, flair and South African element. So I think everyone is respectful of the fact that we are in South Africa and we'll never be able to make, the wines that Bordeaux make in terms of structure and tannin and everything else. But they're perfectly fine with that. We bring this African flair to the brand, and certainly, both sides are there. Should we need to lean on them or gather any information from them, but they very much leave us to do what we need to do.
I think that point just needs a little bit of clarity. Effectively, what Carla's saying there is that the French can't quite make the wine we have in South Africa, but if they keep trying and work hard, they might get close one day. Give me a sense also just quickly before I get you into more trouble and before we jump over to Louis. We've got a great piece coming out this month on a conversation I had a little while back with Mark Kent at Book and Hearts Club, talking about the almost the declassification of Wolf Trap versus a chocolate block. Tell us a little bit about the relationship between the ridiculously successful Rupert Rothschild Classique and the Baron Edmund, kind of where they sit in parallel to each other, and I guess how they work together.
So if we, as I mentioned before, we have our 3 wines in the range, and I think that's what is completely unique for a South African wine brand. Since 1998, when we first produced our first vintages, we've only ever had those 3 wines. I don't think there's very many other South African wine producers that can say that that's how they've started and this is where they are today. So for us, we always, we knew we wanted to create a Chardonnay. It was actually Anthony Rupert's favorite white varietal, so that was why we created a Chardonnay. And then we had 2 red Bordeaux blends that we wanted to bring in. When the decision was made in terms of naming the wines and how we were going to come about, creating these 2, a tasting was had with the winemaker at the time, the CEO, and they said to him, describe the wine style, and he said it's a classic Bordeaux blend. And the name Classique stayed, obviously, because of our French heritage. So Classique is obviously the main driver of the Rupert and Rothschild wine range. But Baron Edmund is the flagship. He's the sort of big brother to Classique. And Nadine, we sort of refer to her as the elegant, sister. So Baron Edmund and Baroness Nadine Chardonnay both produced in relatively small quantities in comparison to Classique. But certainly they are there to underpin what Classique is and what most people know as Rupert and Rothschild. It's our job to make sure that people can see that we're not just about Classique. And I think we're doing that quite successfully now, with people really trying to engage and understand how these other 2 wines fit into the range with us.
Well, I can't just take your word for that, Carla. I'm going to have to judge you on this, which I will in a moment when I try some of the Baron Edmund. Let's nip over to the managing director of Ernie Els Short Game Chipping and Putting, and Mr. Strydom. With this thing, I remember when the wine first came out many years ago. I could only have been about 12, and there was some muttered. Maybe not criticism, but Ernie Els bringing out a wine. What does a guy from Kempton Park know about wine? Surely it's a cheap commercial effort to try and cash in on his name. I think we're more than far enough down the road to have dispelled all of those thoughts on the wine. 21 years on with the Ernie Els signature. How proud are you? How happy are you with where this wine has got? both as a wine itself, but also as a wine brand that's gone beyond this is just tagging onto a famous golfer, and it really is now a wine brand in its own right?
Yeah, Dan. Yes, a good question. When in the beginning, in the early years, I used to compete against the name Ernie Els, and it's like, so which one competes against their own brand name? Because it was Ernie Els the golfer, and we're trying to be Ernie Els the wine company, the great property from the Helderberg. And that is what we had to compete against, and I do say, and I think we used to try and hide away from that unique selling point, and that really changed over time. We started to embrace the name Ernie Els much more, and you say we do sometimes, it opens the door for us. But I say, if you look at the second bottle that the person buys, he buys that because he enjoyed it, and that was the experience that he had of the great Helderberg property, which we sit at, and that has been growing from year on and year on and year on, and every year more and more and more. And that all means people are buying second, third, fourth, fifth bottles, and people love to ask me, does Ernie Els wines improve your golf swing? And I always tell them, yes, it does, but only after the third bottle. So you need to keep going. You need to get to the third bottle, but not maybe if you want to do it all in one night. It will definitely ease your swing. You'll ease into the swing much easier, be much more flexible. So that does help with the golf, not being too rigid. So yes, Ernie Els wines does help, and we've been busy with this blend. It hasn't changed for the last 21 years. It is a Bordeaux blend. Medoc based, Cabernet based, and so people like to say, but doesn't the percentages change each year? Why don't you do that? I said, actually, what I'm trying to show is, I want the terroir and the vintage and the different from year to year how wine changes actually to show, and not try and camouflage with different percentages of blend. So 1 year I need much more Cabernet or a little less Merlot to make the wine more accessible. I want the vintage to be the hero from year on, year in and year out, and that's why that's very much stayed. All 5 of the Bordeaux varieties that we use in the blend, Cabernet based, 60%, 25% Merlot, and then 5% each of Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, and Malbec. Dan?
I know your winemaking ability more than well enough, Louis. You could make wine in Dubai if you needed to. You could make it in Alaska. You've got an extraordinary gift when it comes to making wine. But making it where you do, you've got a really, really useful assistant, and that is possibly in all of South Africa, some of the finest red wine terroir that we have access to. And as good and as great a winemaker as you most certainly are, it must make your life both a bit easier, but also so much more rewarding that you've got this terroir, these grapes in this part of the world to be able to draw from in constructing this particular wine.
Yes, Dan, I always tell myself, the terroirs made me what I am today, and I'm not no illusion. Previously I was the winemaker at Rustem Vrede, and that is where the Ernie Els project started, and it was that maiden vintage what came out of the Rustem Vrede cellar. So I've been working on the Helderberg Mountain since the late 90s, and I know what this great terroir on the Helderberg has done for me as a person. And as you say, it's you are what your environment is, I always say. And the environment that I'm working in is super duper top quality terroir with those deep red Hutton Clovelly soils that have got magic staying power through the summers. Ripen that Cabernet, which ripens late into March, ripens it to perfection, so you can have this great integration of tannins, color, and power coming from the vineyards. When we were making wines in the mid 2000s or late 90s, bigger was always better, and that is really easy for the Helderberg to do, to make these big fat burly wines. I know that has changed, and it is so it's actually, and it's easy to tone something down and try and pick something up which is really hasn't got the potential to make great wine. So the Helderberg, sure. It's such a great terroir to work with, and it humbles you to work with it every day. Dan?
As you say that, I'm looking out the window from the top floor here of the Russecks, and there is a rainbow just sitting above the bay at St Andrews. It is a chilly but glorious day. It's probably going to rain for the rest of the week, so I shall make the most of what little sunshine we have. Right, let's talk about the wine itself. Global Director of Enjoying Wine at Rupert and Rothschild, Carla. Let's have a taste of this wine. They're probably going to be, I suspect, a lot of people who've had the Classique, but maybe haven't had the Baron Edmund. Maybe use that Classique as a point of departure in terms of what we're drinking here. What for you is really making this wine stand out?
So I think, exactly as we mentioned, both of them are Bordeaux blends. And to Louis' point as well, every vintage is different, and every vintage we try and hero the terroir from that vintage as well. So this vintage specifically, 2015, which for red wines in South Africa was a really great year. It is predominantly Merlot based, a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon, and then some Cabernet Franc, tiny bit of Malbec, and a little bit of Petit Verdot. And the big difference between the Classique and the Baron Edmund is definitely the wine of origin. This wine from the beginning has been a wine of origin Stellenbosch, which is we don't own the vineyards, but we definitely have got the good relationships with the growers in that region, so we can classify the wine as Stellenbosch. And it's sort of the big brother to the Classique. You'll get that all of the characteristics of a Bordeaux blend in this glass. But our winemaking style is very elegant and very understated. You'll never find big, harsh tannins. Everything is very silky and very sort of subdued and subtle. We don't want to make big, lavish, bold wines. That's not our style. But are definitely made to be enjoyed now, and certainly, obviously, with the Edmund, can mature for a very, very long time to go.
With a wine like the Classique, I think you've got to a point where you've got a cult following almost, but also an appreciation of what that wine is. And people are kind of one vintage to the next expecting it to be pretty similar to what they've had a year or two beforehand. To what extent does that apply to the Edmund? And to what extent do you let the particular year dictate or direct play a little more?
Yeah, so I think you've hit the nail on the head there. With Classique, our consumer, we understand our consumer really well, and we know that, and they trust us to know that when we release another vintage, that it's going to be consistently as it should have been, with the previous vintage that they might have had the night before or the day before. With Edmund, it is slightly different, and we will only produce, according to the vintage. So if it is a good vintage, we'll produce obviously a little bit more. If it's not, then we'll focus on the best quality from the best blocks in the best vineyards, and only produce that. So every year depends. It's very, very dependent on the vintage. Some years are a lot more, others are a lot less, and the consumer understands that. In South Africa, we were selling on allocation. Most of the markets, we have to limit the supply to a lot of the people in South Africa, and the rest of the world we can sell freely. So it's a nice problem to have.
Well, it's one you have because it is a delightful wine, and the softness of that Merlot base is just, it's a really, really nice celebration of a Bordeaux blend, and consistently is. And consistency is a great word here because we've got 3 estates who consistently deliver terrific wine. And if I look back to the very first episode of Dan Really Likes Wine, almost 5 years ago, the 4 wines we had on that opening episode were the Ernie Els Signature, the Waterford Gem, and the Antoine Rupert blend, along with some Villafonte. So it was 4 big guns, 3 of them being replicated today, and very happily. So I want to ask you about the 2 others we've got here, Carla, just from your place in the wine world, your thoughts on not necessarily just Mark and Louis, but the Waterford brands, the Ernie Els brands, and your, I suspect, admiration for both of them.
Yeah, I think it's, as I mentioned earlier, wine is all about the story. And for me, I have quite a big hospitality background in my previous company that I used to work with. And Waterford was always a benchmark for us in terms of, their tasting room, their hospitality, how they really interact with the guest. And they've just recently won an award now, which really stamps, it firmly in people's minds that they're doing the best that they can do, and the rest of the industry should really follow. every time we've been at Waterford and we've had a tasting, we've had an experience with any of the waiters and the staff that work there, it's just been phenomenal. So the wine is lovely, the wine is really great, and I love a lot of their wines. But I think they really are about the consumer experience, and I think they've really nailed it. So they really are one of the icons, if not the icon, to follow in terms of hospitality in South Africa. And of course, with Ernie Els and everything that Louis has done there, and just looking at the new premises that they have there, the passion that Louis brings to the table and brings to the brand, I think is unique. And people support people that have got passion. People support brands that have got passion, and if you've got the story behind it and you can really link that through, I think they've done it wonderfully in their tasting room and their restaurant. The whole Ernie Els sort of Hall of Fame that you walk into, you really feel that brand. So distancing yourself from the golfer versus the wine, I don't think is needed, because it's just got a wonderful story, and people really aspire to that. So I think his tasting room, and if you look at how busy they are and everything that they're doing for Stellenbosch and for that area, is phenomenal. So I think the wine brands are really great, and yeah, definitely it's a privilege to share the stage with them.
I suspect both Mark and Louis are blushing visibly at the moment. High praise indeed from Carla. Thank you. The award that Carla mentioned is Tim Atkin giving Waterford a nod for the quality of their cellar door experience. And I was there just a few weeks ago. It is exceptional. Mark, what does it mean to you guys to get that sort of recognition?
Yeah, Dan, it's great. It's, especially in a time that we're on a red list and we're not seeing a lot of international guests, to actually still get an award like that to remind people that we are still a destination area. Stellenbosch, and I think South Africa as a whole, we are extremely hospitable people. We like to welcome people at our homes, at our wineries, and actually give them a real South African experience, take them through the cellar. And I do agree. I do enjoy the Waterford experience. That's why I was attracted to Waterford more than 12 years ago when I came to work here. It's really about the journey and the experience. But I think everyone as a whole in South Africa does that hospitality sort of experience really, really well. There's so many farms on top of the list that I can just rattle off at the moment. But with my traveling, the little bit of traveling that I've done in the world, it's just so difficult to actually even make appointments and actually visit wineries and have a winery experience, let alone cellar tours, are unheard of in the international world. I think the only real country I'm thinking of is Napa Valley that actually provides something like that. Otherwise, it's a pretty unique experience, I think, in South Africa. So tourism is something that we really are desperate for, to receive some more tourists. And in a way, I got almost excited hearing we're on the red list. But it's not the red wine list. It was actually that people weren't coming to us anymore. So it's a great award for us, and we're very, very appreciative of it.
It's one that's driven by many things. You've got a terrific team, as I've experienced on many occasions, and as Carla's echoed. But you also have some rather nice wine. Let's try some of that wine. You've already given us a broad indication of what we're drinking, and the Bordeaux Nature Edition BB 2014. Give us the biography of the wine, Mr. Leroux.
Yeah, so again, it's from the bookshelf, and it's very much coded, so it's not very much explaining in the code. So BB could really mean anything, but for us as winemakers, it means Bordeaux blend, and I'm very thankful for Carla to explain that actually in the Edmund wine as well as the Classique, is that's actually what I think South African, more focusing on Stellenbosch, is proud of, is creating Cabernet Sauvignon driven wines, whether it's a blend or a varietal on its own. It's really what works well in our area. Not to say that there are pockets that can create amazing other wines, such as white wines as well. But this is one that I mentioned as well, often pops up. It's just such a classic. It's one that works really well for us, and it forms the base of the gem blend. So it's a very important component for us, as being almost 70-75% of the gem. So it's a large focus point on the research side. It's a large role player as well. So we really need to know how the Bordeaux components actually age and interact with each other. I particularly enjoyed the 2014. What's nice about the library wines as well, we do tend to age them a little bit longer, and basically a little bit more respectful of when we think the best time is for release. 2014 for me is a vintage that I think is extremely drinkable, very velvety, soft, a little bit more unusual for us, not being as tight and austere and almost dry tannin driven to some of our other vintages. So I think it's a lovely vintage to be enjoying. I think it gives you a very good indication of what aged Bordeaux blend or aged Cabernets come from in Stellenbosch. I think looking at some of the other vintages like the Rupert and Rothschild wine you're tasting is probably a lot tighter, more seamless to what you're tasting in this 2014, and it's only a year difference. So I think it gives you a good indication of a little bit more age on a Bordeaux style from Stellenbosch.
Well, we've got an assortment of people watching. My mother is watching in Belfast on her 4th bottle of wine of the day. Waterford, Grenache Noir and Cabernet Sauvignon, 2 of my favourites. Spelt the American way. No, she must have been hacked. My mother would never do that. And then Grant Sauls is watching over on YouTube. Great lineup tonight, Dan. These estates offer exceptional wines. The Waterford Wine Society experience is awesome. It certainly is. Mark, before we jump over to Louis to wrap up with his wine, just similar to Carla's assessment, your thoughts on both the Rupert and Rothschild space and Ernie Els as a winemaking champion?
Thanks. Yes, I actually know them relatively well. I have been a part of the Rupert empire a little bit. I worked a little bit at Antoni's farm in Franschhoek for a few years before I came to Waterford. So I know it really well. I'm very envious of the fact that Carla's only responsible for 3 wines. But I mean, I think it's a mammoth task in a sense that I don't think they're small volumes, and to create such fantastic, consistent wines at that level, I think is really hats off. The wines are basically as classic as Antoni Rupert's car museum in Franschhoek. They're just forever delivering great quality wines. And I do see them actually on my dinner table relatively often. So it's an amazing seller. Louis, we are practically neighbors. He's a little bit involved, literally neighboring to Waterford as well. Very, very consistent. The wines are as smooth and consistent as Ernie's swing as well. I think every time I pick up an Ernie Els wine, I just know it's going to be made with so much precision and class. And it's made on exactly what Louis was describing, those soils of the Helderberg. You know you're going to get that earthy, strong power characteristic, and you're going to have a great dinner conversation with great wine and great food. It's not just an afternoon sundowner.
I think it's a mutual appreciation society this evening, and rightly so, because we've got some terrific estates, great brands, lovely, lovely wine. Let's step over to Louis as we come towards the end of what's been a really special afternoon under still blue skies here at St Andrews, the Roux Hotel, the Alfred Dunhill Links Championships, the signature that Ernie gave direction to, I think almost a little unwittingly, when it first happened 21 years ago, still finds itself in a regal space. For someone who's never had it, the introduction, Louis, to what this wine is all about when you finally get around to drinking it.
Yes, Dan, I want to know, does the Ernie Els wine improve your golf?
Well, it couldn't make it much worse, I think, Louis. So let's leave it at that.
What time are you teeing off?
I've got to get through the wine first. I'm purely focused on the wine. Well, I don't think my golf can come afterwards.
Okay, just giving you a hard time because people have to ask me, like, how good is your handicap? How good is your golf? So I said, Ernie said to me, if my handicap goes below 20, he's getting rid of me immediately because then he knows I'm not spending enough time at the winery. So I've got a very artificially high handicap so that I can keep my day job. But I don't think I'm making any money on a golf course, that's for sure. Anyway, cool. It's great to chat a little bit about the 2015 vintage signature you have in your glass. 2015 is the much lauded vintage of the second decade of the 20s. It's got that real Helderberg length, and that's the one we're actually selling at the moment at the winery. So it's 6 years old now. Now it's just, I'd like to say, wine's only getting onto its plateau now. with this integration of the the 5 different varieties that we have in it. But it's Cabernet based, so Cabernet is going to give you that ability to age, and this wine can, if you look after it real well, and age it at the right temperatures and not in direct sunlight, and this one is going to go 10-15 years on a canter. They won't even think twice by reaching that age, because specifically of the vintage and specifically because of the Helderberg. But like I said previously, it's Cabernet Sauvignon based. I think that's really important. 60% of Cabernet, and that's and Mark touched on that with Stellenbosch and our drive to show Cabernet Sauvignon. We have 10 different Cabernet clones on the farm, each vinified separately, brought into and matured separately, and then blended together to make the 60% of the signature, and then 25% Merlot. Merlot is the much more feminine part of the blend. It's actually to bring to knit the different components together and fill all the gaps in the blend. Cabernet Franc 5%. Cabernet Franc has got much more austerity, much more minerality, and that's what that brings. I don't want to have too much like red fruit, so that's what the Cabernet Franc brings. And then the Petit Verdot and Malbec, I call them the marketing department of the blend, because they've got such vibrant fruit and loud and in your face, and that is what I use the Malbec and the Petit Verdot for. So each variety has a very prominent role to play in the blend to make the different components close to perfection as possible. And that is, the great wines, most great wines in the world are red blends. And that is just very much in the line of red blends, Bordeaux, Medoc based, and it's got amazing legs for the 2015 vintage, which was a great vintage for us. Dan.
I think probably the most striking comment of all of those, and you've given a wonderful synopsis of the wine, is right at the start when you talk about the time it still has to go. It's my only sadness in drinking what's already a delightful wine. At 6 years old, it's still far, far too young, and it's still got a long journey ahead of it. If you can manage to exact the patience to not open it before then, and it's a great tribute to the terroir, but I think also to the winemaking. So cheers to you for that, Louis. I will ask you, as I have the others just before we wrap up, Rupert Rothschild, Waterford, the Louis Strydom stamp of approval?
Yes, very much a stamp of approval. Start with the Rupert Rothschild. I know the MD real well, JC, and we discuss a lot about where we're going, what we're doing, and if I just get more and more involved and understand what their business, and it's amazing what the Rupert and Rothschild team have put together, Carla inclusive, how they go into the minutest detail on creating a large volume brand. And we all talk about how do we make South Africa relevant on the international market, and that is by sending out great wine in volume. Because sending out little bits and pieces does not create an international brand. And I think that's what the Rupert Rothschild Classique can do. It can make South Africa show what we can make in a large volume, quality wine coming from the Stellenbosch and South African wine regions. And that is what no one else has been done successful except the Classique. And that is something really to admire. And we benchmark the Classique a lot against our wines, and it's like you said, the quality that you get with that volume, and that is the secret about great wine. Like I say, anybody can make something really special, like a signature at 1,000 cases by 6, but do 100,000 plus cases by 6, something special, and that's what the Rupert team can do at Rupert Rothschild. And so yeah, it's just amazing how they consistently they can keep it there. And then the Waterford team, Kevin, I was the winemaker after Kevin left Bristol Freda, and Kevin built that business up from scratch. And right from the beginning, Waterford was a winery that everybody looked up at, and how they built that front of house. It's actually a big quad. and everything happens inside. So you're so focused about the wine, what's happening at the winery, and the front of house experience is unsurpassed in the industry. And then Mark came in and just lifted the brand up to a new level from quality. So it's the whole experience from coming in those front gates, walking up to the winery, tasting the wine, the experience, the ambiance of the place. And that is what really is all about. And we've touched about it a few times this evening. It's about what you create around the wine. We all make great wine. There's what you create around that wine that sets you apart from the average wines out there. Dan.
I think you missed one important part about Waterford there, Louis, and I quote my 7-year-old daughter, Erin, Daddy, I like Waterford the best because they've got squirrels. So Carla, Louis, if you're thinking you're missing a trick, more squirrels and you'll hit that 7-year-old market in due course. Guys, thank you so much. I can't believe an hour or thereabouts has raced by. It's been delightful drinking the wine, but equally so chatting to all three of you and sharing some stories of your wine and the roles they play. I think it's a really cool week for South African wine because it's brilliant South African wine being showcased to some pretty influential people who are drinking this wine and going, hang on, this is better than French stuff. And I think that's what they're going to be saying this week because you've all produced some wonderful, wonderful wine. So thank you for the wine. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the stories. Enjoy the rest of the bottles, which I'm sure you all have just out of shot, but have been quietly enjoying. And I look forward to having all three of you back on the show again soon. But a really big thank you and have a lovely evening, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Pleasure.
So there we go. Carla Malherbe, Global Head of Drinking Lovely Wine in Cool Places Around the World at Rupert and Rothschild. Louis Strydom, Head of Golf and Wine and much other stuff at Ernie Els, and Mark Roux, who is winemaker extraordinaire and Kevin Arnold 2.0 over at Waterford together. Three great wine people with some terrific wine. It's all wine that we're going to be drinking this week at the Alfred Dunhill Links Championships, a tournament played across St Andrews, Kings Barnes and Carnoustie, but focused very much here in St Andrews, the Russicks, where I am now, the St Andrews, the Old Course Hotel just up the road, and our tournament marquee where a lot of that wine will be shown over the rest of this week. Huge thank you to Gareth Robertson, Bear from Ranson Rupert Wine for facilitating all of the wine today and putting our list together. I will look forward to seeing you on Thursday at some point. We were going to do it this evening, but at some point hoping to share some wine with Dave Farrell from Lincoln Park, who's been on the show before, massive fan of South African wine. And we're going to be comparing some South African and Californian wine at some point, but really through the week, as well as watching and playing golf, enjoying the hospitality of the Dunhill team and being part of just such a fabulous tournament. We'll be raising many glasses of South African wine and celebrating it here in Scotland. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you back live on Thursday, and look out this week for a couple of great pieces. One of them, a really cool story with Mark Kent from Buchenholz as we discuss the wine that he's making. And I think there might be something from Duncan Savage coming up as well. Have a great Monday. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon. Goodbye. To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.